Hey everyone, Token Dave over here, a dorky token black guy who's just trying to get by. And welcome to another edition of Comic Book Concepts. Here, I talk about certain jargon, items, slang, and other terminology comic book fans like to use when they describe their favorite heroes or villains related to certain events that happen within comics. Keep in mind that everything that I state in Comic Book Concepts are not solely exclusive to comics. They can be seen or heard of in other realms of fiction, such as sci-fi and fantasy. So, I already went over basically the Silver Age of comics. Now I'm going into what I like to call the Dark Age of comics. Now, it's popularly known that this particular age, by general consensus, is considered the Bronze Age. However, I personally consider this the Dark Age, and I'll explain in a little bit. But first off, let me explain that basically from my personal understanding, the Dark Age actually takes place between 1972 all the way up until 1990, all right? There's a particular reason why, all right? So, here's the thing. And by the way, while it's well known that this is supposed to be the Bronze period, the reason why I call this the Dark period is because this is when things started getting a lot darker within comics. And to top it off, a lot of the adaptations you all are seeing, it's come mainly from this period of comics. So why is this called the Bronze Age and not the Dark Age is beyond me. However, I will say that the reason why I started calling this the Dark Age is because of the events that happened primarily with Spider-Man. You see, when Spider-Man fought the Green Goblin, in the death of Gwen Stacy, his first girlfriend and love interest, died. This was something new, controversial, and never before seen in comics, because always, with the love interest, the hero was always able to save them. This is the first time that any superhero love interest has died, as a result of both knowing the hero's identity and the hero's actions. And this displayed a shift in the tone of comics, because at this time, things started getting very controversial within comics. Hence, this is why I consider this the Dark Age, and it looks like I lost Mel the Menace. But, and by the way, the reason why everyone says Green Goblin is Spider-Man's biggest and greatest foe, it all stemmed from the death of Gwen Stacy. And this was not the first controversial thing that occurred. At this point, we also had basically, a rise in drug use within the social stratosphere as a result of basically things that occurred in the 60s, and as a result, comic books start to emulate some of those issues, primarily in DC, where you had basically, Green Lantern and Green Arrow in a team-up comic they had, where it was revealed that Roy Harper, Speedy, was a heroin addict. Yes. And by the way, everyone talking about the whole, heroin opioid epidemic. Please, all right? It's been an epidemic a lot longer. Hence, one of the reasons why Roy himself became a heroin addict. So, yeah. Anywho, also at the Dark Age of comics, like I stated with basically Green Lantern and Green Arrow, there were a lot of team-up comics being created. This was to give other characters more of a push, because around this time, there was a slew of superheroes in basically both Marvel and DC. A lot of them did not get to have their own moment to shine. Some people got lost in the shuffle. So for basically the big two to allow certain heroes to get their moment in the spotlight, they were teamed up and paired with other heroes so that more stories and more creative stories could be told. And this is where basically a lot of a lot of comics and characters, reflected the times. For example, around this time period, we had basically the whole martial arts explosion, basically the kung fu craze. This is where we got characters like Iron Fist, Shang-Chi, and all. In addition, this was also the time where basically the blaxploitation period in movies and entertainment was on the rise, as well as basically a time period where more minority superheroes were introduced. This is how we ended up getting this is not only the place where we got basically Falcon. We also Falcon's still considered Silver Age, but basically he was a lot more active basically in the Dark Age. This is how we ended up getting Bumblebee from the Teen Titans. This is when we ended up getting Black Lightning. This is when we ended up getting Luke Cage. This is when we started having basically Daughter of the Dragons. So a lot more minority superheroes were introduced at this time period. In addition, we also had a lot more female superheroes being introduced as well too. Not only female superheroes being introduced, a lot of other female supporting characters were elevated in the dark period. And one of the important things about the dark period was a transformation of a lot of characters, particularly when it came to Daredevil. The Daredevil mythos that we all know and that we all like, in the general public, was due to basically Frank Miller. This is a time period where we got a deeper exploration into Daredevil's abilities and more so basically how he was able to train himself. And this was a time period where, we couldn't just throw disbelief out of the window. More things were described and more detail were given and more depth and development were given to the characters. And when I said that things were controversial in the dark period, they were really controversial. Not only was it the death of Gwen Stacy and also Roy Harper being a drug addict, we actually had the first major reboot of comics within Crisis on Infinite Earth. And not only did that try to reboot and merge together all the universes within the DC universe, a lot of superheroes were killed off. And at this period, the death of superheroes was was a big deal. I'll get into that when I talk about Crisis on Infinite Earth more so. But it didn't stop there. We actually got the Killing Joke as a result of the dark period, and we also ended up where the Joker paralyzed Barbara Gordon, as well as the death of a Robin in the likes of Jason Todd's, So a lot of these elements and things started taking place, and more of the supervillains were a lot more homicidal and things were more graphic. And this actually, the dark period, was the resurrection of basically, more in-depth, darker, and somber tones within comic books. And this all came to an end in 1990. And the reason why it came into the end of 1990 was because around this time, the dark period became the status quo. But not only did it become the status quo, things ended up getting kicked up a notch, which will lead into the modern period, which I'll be discussing in the next video. So, do you all agree with my take of calling this period the dark period as opposed to the bronze period, or do you have your own takes on this? Please drop me a comment below, give me a like, follow me on Facebook at Token Dave or on Twitter at Token Dave 80, subscribe, and ring that bell so you know when new video loads. But until then, this has been Token Dave, the dorky black guy who's just trying to get by. I'll catch all of you later.